It is nothing special about Selassie. It is nothing special about Selassie.
The story of Ethiopia's great monarch, modernizer, and tragic hero Haile Selassie starts in the 1,000-year-old city of Harar. Rastafari was the son of nobleman Ras Makonnen, a provincial governor. He was also an Ethiopian hero for fighting off invading Italians in the late 1800s. His father decided to educate young Rastafari with tutors of different specialities, one an Ethiopian monk and the other a Mexican surgeon.
It was Ras Makonnen, Wolde Michael, who was governor of Harar. He was also the foreign minister and cousin of Emperor Menelik II and later father of Emperor Haile Selassie. Here's his palace in Harar.
Menelik died on his bed, and under Ethiopian law, the emperor could name any member of the royal family. It doesn't have to be his son or anything that. His daughter Zadito was supposed to be the heir in succession in terms of order. He bypassed her Menelik and named his grandson Zadito's child. His name Lidjasu, Lidj, one name Yasu.
The new emperor was already half mad with syphilis, turning from youthful dissipation to exotic vice and murder. He tried to murder Tafari on this lake near Harar, where Tafari often went boating with friends. This time, Yasu bribed a servant to hole the boat so that it sank in the middle of the lake. A friend was drowned. Tafari survived by swimming ashore.
Selassie and Abuna Johannes. Abuna is the head of the church, the Coptic church at the time. They changed the name now to the Ethiopian National Church. He and Abuna Johannes conspired with the French and the British to overthrow Yasu because Yasu wanted to unify Ethiopia. Ethiopia was fighting the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, was killing out each other every day. And Yasu wanted to stop that and go back because he wanted to do what his grandfather had done, organized to overthrow the Europeans out of the place, like his father his grandfather tried to do at the Battle of Adawa in 1896. They overthrow Yasu, put him in a dungeon, but he escaped.
It was 1914, and as the guns opened up on Europe's western front 4,000 miles away, the contest in Ethiopia took an older shape. Christianity once again prepared for a clash with Islam. A Muslim empire in Africa was the bait dangled before Yasu by Germany and Turkey, and in his craze for power, the new ruler of a Christian empire became a Muslim in all but name. A Muslim empire in Africa was the bait dangled before Yasu by Germany and Turkey, and in his craze for power, the new ruler of a Christian empire became a Muslim in all but name. For the Christians, it was the last straw. Vice, murder, and rape they were accustomed to, but apostasy struck at the heart of their tradition. From over the Red Sea, the Arabs swept into Africa with their own revelation. Soon, Ethiopia was a Christian stronghold surrounded by the Muslim world.
Yasu wanted to unify Ethiopia.
Yasu was formally excommunicated from the Ethiopian church.
He took the throne by killing both Zadita and her son, Yasu. As a matter of fact, that's why I am in the West. My father was working for Yasu in Brazil as the consul general.
Tafari was proclaimed regent with the title of Ras, or prince. He was 24 years old. Zauditu, Menelik's daughter, was crowned empress at the same time. But the struggle was unfinished. Lijiasu was still free, and on this great plain north of Addis Ababa, his father, Ras Michael, gathered an army to restore him to the throne.
That's why I am in the West. My father was working for Lijiasu. That's why I am in the West. My father was working for Lijiasu.
It was another medieval scene. The horsemen were dressed in the monkey skins of war, with Ras Michael at their head. On the other side, Rastafari's men gathered for battle in the same way. In Europe, the bloodiest of modern wars was being fought with tanks, machine guns, and poison gas. But here, the centuries rolled back as if to King Henry at Agincourt, or Richard losing his crown at Bosworth Field. Like Menelik's victory at Adowa, this battle of Rastafari for his crown has become one of the great subjects of Ethiopia's popular art. The battle lasted a full day, surging one way and then another. But in the end, the man who rode back to Addis Ababa in triumph was Rastafari. It was a victory that he still recalls as the turning point of his life.
He was appointed regent by Empress Zewditu, who used the young man to solidify her own hold on power due to his influential family. He was appointed regent by Empress Zewditu, who used the young man to solidify her own hold on power due to his influential family.
As a matter of fact, that's why I am in the West. My father was working for Lijiasu in Brazil as the consul general. In 1924, we were sent there. Shortly after we went there is when the first overthrow came. And then if anybody that was called back home and working for the Lijiasu was hanged. My father didn't want to be a dead patriot. And so he went back to Puerto Rico with my mother. That's my mother's country, through Cuba. And then we stood in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands for a number of years before I went back to Ethiopia. In 1959, working for the United Nations, when I went to Ethiopia, he locked me up. The United Nations had to get me out as a dangerous Ethiopian. In 1959, working for the United Nations, when I went to Ethiopia, he locked me up. The United Nations had to get me out as a dangerous Ethiopian. You can't get rid of your Ethiopian citizenship. Once you're born there, you are for the rest of your life under Ethiopian law. But the United Nations got me out. My father wanted to get back. My father died 102 years old. At 96, he petitioned, 96 and blind. He petitioned Ethiopia for return, and Selassie turned him down. Said he was a dangerous enemy to the state. So, isn't somebody I got anything good to say about?
He had to fight poverty and tradition, but he was still only regent, and his hands were still tied by his old enemies at court, who were once more plotting against him. It wasn't until 1930 that Rastafari won supreme power at last and ascended the throne when the Empress Zauditu died.
The roots of the Rastafarian movement first took hold here in the ghetto, the slums of Kingston. Marcus Garvey's predictions in the 1920s of the crowning of a black messiah in Africa, followed in 1930 by the coronation of Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie, gave Jamaica's black masses a new focus and for the first time hope. Hope of an identity and dignity previously impossible in the squalor of these slums.
Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican slum dweller who later became a celebrity in New York's Harlem. Today, he remains one of Jamaica's national heroes. To the Rastafarians, he was a prophet like John the Baptist, this time announcing the second coming of Christ. Haile Selassie was at birth named Ras, or Prince, Tafari, Rastafari. At his coronation in Ethiopia, he was crowned King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah. Names that the Bible foretold would be given to the returned Messiah.
So, isn't somebody I got anything good to say about?
At the Versailles Peace Conference, in their victory, the Allies again redrew the map of Africa. But once more, Ethiopia escaped. Playing off the great powers against each other, Rastafari kept his independence. Joining the new League of Nations, he put his faith in the latest post-war watchword, collective security. In such great company, one little country would surely be safe, and none would let another gobble it up.
Rastas believe that Ethiopia was and is the true biblical Israel. Thus, as they see it, blacks were the original chosen people of God, and the Jews are impostors. They say that Jesus Christ was black, and they worship Haile Selassie as the returned Messiah.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
Africa is their promised land. All other civilization is Babylon. And Babylon's leader, considered by them to be the devil on earth, is the Pope.
We kill him, every thought we have is just to kill the Pope. Kill him, kill out Rome, kill Babylon.
And you're serious about that?
Yeah, and how we going to kill them though is with lightning, earthquake, and thunder. Not gun or bayonet, which is Babylon's weapons, but with lightning, earthquake, and thunder.
In my youth, I saw the war as an instrument in the defense of something for which I held a great esteem. And most of it was through the instruction of my mother, who was fiercely anti-racist. She struggled against poverty. She struggled for all the rights and dignities of a woman. Coming from Jamaica, she was a neat package for all of us. And in her struggle and in her counsel, I'll never forget when Italy first invaded Ethiopia, my mother's indignity at that, the great sense of crisis that existed for her was to watch these people who were very much like her own people from the mountains of Jamaica. It's not by any stretch of the imagination that Rastafarians and the great tribute to the Lion of Judah and Jah and all that comes from Abyssinian tradition historically.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
And when Ethiopia was invaded by Italy, my mother was just absolutely furious. Both the church for blessing Italian soldiers to go off and kill these both barefoot black people in Africa for no reason other than for the lust of conquest. And she said that she felt that struggle was our struggle.
In the Rasta movement, that Haile Selassie is no longer with us in the physical form, what at the present day is the movement and the energy and the force that keeps the Rasta movement keep it going at this point?
The whole answer to the question is that Noah have three sons, Shem and Japheth, you know. And I am from Africa. His Majesty our Father. When we search and find out who is Jesus Christ, it's kind of modern day Bible, see him revealed as Jesus. So that's what we deal with. Him are the God Almighty now.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
These people are waiting for the appearance of a living legend. Ministers of government, ambassadors and their wives, princes of the church. By now they've probably lost count of the number of times they've waited here at Addis Ababa airport for the same extraordinary man. In a moment, he'll step from the door of this aircraft to a scene that's even more familiar to him. And here he comes, the legend in person. One of the world's best-known figures and faces, and one that most of us know least about. Father figure of modern Africa and relic of a vanishing world, feudal despot and reforming monarch, one of the last claimants to the divine right of kings, the legendary descendant of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie The First, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of God, King of kings, Emperor of Ethiopia.
nothing special about Selassie because she, Zadita, Makeda, was the one that brought to the throne the name her son the Lion of Judah. All emperors of Ethiopia from that time carried the name Lion of Judah. It wasn't a big deal. He just carried the name that others were carrying.
In the Jewish tradition, the earliest reference to the Lion of Judah comes from Genesis, in the first book of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, and the Christian Old Testament. The book of Genesis is generally considered to have been written sometime between 1400 and 1440 BC. In Genesis chapter 14, verse 9, when blessing his son Judah, the Jewish patriarch Jacob refers to Judah as the young lion. Thus here we first note the lion becoming metaphorically and symbolically paired with Judah and the Jews. It is also from this text that the Lion of Judah further evolves into a titular station or office, defender and leader of the Jewish tribe, which itself becomes the basis of considerable messianic expectation and speculation in early Judaism.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
We frequently find lion gates in archaeological ruins from Israel to the gates of Ethiopia's Aksumite empires, palaces, and temples, to the Hittite sites in Turkey, to the Babylonian and Persian sites in Iraq, or the Assyrian and Egyptian sites. It was widespread and popular symbol of royalty, as the lion was seen by many as the king of the predators, or even as the king of all the beasts. In fact, we know that Ramses II kept live lions, as did successive Ethiopian emperors, including up until the time of my late grandfather, the last emperor, Haile Selassie The First.
You don't believe literally that Haile Selassie lives?
Yes, I know he, well, let's put it this way. I have no proof to the contrary that he does not live.
Now, my question is whether you mean that literally or spiritually.
Oh, literally. He lives in the flesh.
You don't think he is dead and buried in Ethiopia?
Well, that's what the press say, but you and I know what the press can do.
In ancient Jewish art, we often also find lions depicted in protective roles, guarding the Ark of the Covenant at chapel entrances, as in the sculpture of the ancient synagogues at Sardis, Horazim or Baram in Palestine, and in many of the mosaics dating from the early Byzantine era.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
That name, Haile Selassie, among the Rastafari.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
You know, most of us who were nationalistic in thought always looked to a scripture in the Bible that said that Ethiopia one day would stretch forth its hands. And as black people who never thought that we had a stake in the scriptures, but when we found Ethiopia, we found Africa, we found ourselves. So there's a special magic that Ethiopia has. Maybe I'm not using the right word, but it's mystical, it's magical. For black people, Ethiopia, that name, Haile Selassie, among the Rastafari.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
But Haile Selassie gave us somebody that we could look to. And among those of us who never saw a black monarch, we saw King George, we saw Queen Elizabeth, we saw all of the white kings and queens, but Haile Selassie gave us somebody that we could look to say, well, some of us were kings.
Arthur Kitchen, 30-year-old journalist, university graduate, and devoted Rastaman. You don't believe literally that Haile Selassie lives?
Yes, I know he, well, let's put it this way. I have no proof to the contrary that he does not live.
Now, my question is whether you mean that literally or spiritually.
Oh, literally. He lives in the flesh.
You don't think he is dead and buried in Ethiopia?
Well, that's what the press say, but you and I know what the press can do.
As recently as 5 years ago, believers such as Arthur Kitchen were routinely committed to Jamaica's Bellevue Mental Hospital. Physicians regularly diagnosed them as medically and legally insane. But no longer. That's because Fred Hickling has stopped the practice. He may strike you as looking a little like a Rasta man himself, but he is in fact the hospital's senior medical officer. And Dr. Hickling, born to Jamaica's elite, trained at the famed Edinburgh Medical School, has come to believe that the image of Rastafarians as madmen is rubbish.
So you think it is a political force? Oh, undoubted so. It is a national liberation movement. It is and even more than a national liberation movement. It's a national liberation movement in a global sense, a national liberation movement perhaps for black people around the world.
And this is one reason the music appeals worldwide.
That's the truth. And you can go to a number of different countries at this time, Africa, North American continent, Europe, and you will find reggae music everywhere. And the influence of Rastafari, you'll find it everywhere. In other words, no matter what you want to believe or think, Rastafari has made itself a reality around the world. So much struggle in the world. So much trouble in the world. So much trouble in the world.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know I speak in behalf of all of my fellow Americans in welcoming His Imperial Majesty back to the United States. Since His Majesty visited the United States nearly a decade ago, we have seen one of the most extraordinary revolutions in history, and that has been the appearance on the world scene of 29 independent countries in the short space of less than 10 years, including over 150 million people. Of 29 independent countries in the short space of less than 10 years, including over 150 million people. Of 29 independent countries in the short space of less than 10 years, including over 150 million people.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
The conference recently held in His Majesty's capital.
And so, the focus of intercontinental affairs moved once more to Addis Ababa, where the 10th meeting of the Organization of African Unity was held. His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor Haile Selassie, received President Amin when he arrived at the airport. President Amin has always been a great believer in the objects for which the organization stands: unification of thought and purpose between the nations, the complete eradication of colonialism, and above all, the establishment of peace and amity. In its 10 years of life, the organization has successfully mediated between the nations in war and in the nearness of war. President Idi Amin Dada's address to the conference was one of great importance, and again, it underlined the status of Uganda in world affairs. The President's attitude to African unity was summed up when he said, "Whatever we do must be done for the good of our continent. If we all play our roles well, the imperialists will not find any loophole in our midst to exploit. We must have unity among ourselves and share a common feeling of conviction as to our destiny."
Served, I think, to bring together in a great cooperative movement the people of most of these countries. And the success of that conference was due in no small part to the leadership of our distinguished guest. His efforts to move his country forward and provide a better life for its people, and his efforts throughout the world, which stretch back over 30 or 40 years. For all of this, Your Majesty, we take the greatest pride in welcoming you here. You do us honor, and I can assure you that there is no guest that we will receive in this country that will give a greater sense of livelier pride and satisfaction to the American people than your presence here today. Your Majesty, you're most welcome.
We've spent $146 billion. With that money, we bought a $2 million yacht for Haile Selassie.
Your Majesty, in view of the African drive against colonialism and South African racism, what is the place the white man will have in Africa? Does he have any choice between leaving or accepting domination by the black man?
Have a look at the passport. We'll put it up on screen. This, you are seeing a passport that was actually issued to Madiba in 1962. It is in Amharic, which is one interesting thing, besides the name, is Madiba's profession. It says that he was a journalist. And this is how he managed to travel through Africa on this passport as a journalist, but with an Ethiopian passport. One of the things that Madiba recently learned is that while he was in Ethiopia, the apartheid government knew where he was and had actually paid his minders to kill him.
The language is French. The degree is Doctor of Humane Letters. The place is the United States. A world leader and educator is being honored. His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie The First of Ethiopia. A world leader and educator is being honored. His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie The First of Ethiopia. No stranger to the atmosphere of learning found on the campus of Georgetown University. Here students are in direct association with world-renowned scholars in the field of foreign affairs, the arts, and the humanities. Here, the inquiring mind finds nourishment. During the 8-day visit of Haile Selassie to the United States, he will participate in many ceremonies that demonstrate the respect of a friendly nation.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
Ethiopian women are among the welcoming crowds. The Emperor of Ethiopia has come to Washington to discuss important aspects of world peace and economic progress. He confers with President Kennedy on African problems and aspirations in these vital areas. The Vice President of the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson, and leaders of the Senate and House of Representatives hold discussions with the Emperor. This is where the men and women elected by the American people make the laws which govern them and determine American policies and world affairs. In the same room where President Kennedy holds his press conferences, the Emperor meets with over 500 representatives of the American and world press. He describes the purpose of his visit: to renew his acquaintance with our nation and to ensure that the ties of friendship which have linked the two countries over the years will be maintained and strengthened. In reply to one question, the Emperor says, "What interests us most in Africa today is the collaboration for the purpose of achieving unity for the benefit of Africa and as a contribution to world peace." Robert F. Wagner and Mrs. Wagner greet the Lion of Judah on the steps of the City Hall.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
Where an open forum, nations can share the benefits of peaceful association. Secretary General U Thant greets the Emperor and is presented with the Charter of African Unity drafted at the Addis Ababa Conference and ratified by the African states. The knowledge and skills of America have been made available to these students through the dedication and foresight of their Emperor, Haile Selassie. His visit to the United States is brightened by their progress, and the United States has been honored by his presence. From the people of Ethiopia, a gift to the United Nations, a finely carved miniature of the great obelisk of Aksum, the ancient capital of Ethiopia. The Emperor addresses a special meeting of the General Assembly.
ክቡር ፕሬዚዳንት የተከበራችሁ መልእክተኞች
The Charter of the United Nations expresses the noblest aspirations of man, the abjuration of force in the settlement of disputes between states, the assurance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, the safeguarding of international peace and security.
ሰብአዊ መብቱ እንዲጠበቅለት ለማረጋገጥ የዓለም ሰላምና ጸጥታ እንዲጠበቅ ለማድረግ የሚያስችሉትን የሰው ልጅ የሚመኛቸውን ከፍተኛ ዓላማዎች የያዘ ነው።
Television is another medium of communication through which millions of Americans see and hear the Emperor. On a program devoted to current events, the sight and sound of free discussion is transmitted to the television audience.
It is nothing special about Selassie.
Rex Nettleford is a professor at the University of the West Indies.
They are more than just exploited proletarians. They are denigrated Africans in exile. Now that colors the whole worldview in a very fundamental sense. And you have probably heard some Rastafarians in Jamaica saying that we don't want capitalism, we don't want socialism, we want to be Rastafari.
Being exploited by the Cuban-Soviet axis. This is an accusation I've heard about Rastafarians. Any justification, in fact, for that?
Oh, no, I mean, not at all.
Let me go down the list of other accusations and fears about Rastafarians that have been put to me. That it represents a large criminal element, and that what you would call discrimination by police is at least partially justified because they have dealt on a large scale with criminality.
Well, let's put it this way. A lot of people put on Parsons collars and perpetrate terrible crimes, and in this sense, the Rastafarians have been vulnerable. In fact, people have gone in, they have grown their hair, they have sort of taken the outward sign. But as many a Rasta man will ask you, have they got the inward grace? And that is what really determines whether a man is a true Rasta believer or not.
To extend his foreign contacts, he toured the European capitals. In London, the Times described his arrival as an historical event. In Stockholm, he met King Gustav, and the Swedes promised him doctors. In Brussels, he found financiers ready to invest in his country. The French were already in Ethiopia. They had completed a railway from the coast to Addis Ababa in 1918. It was Ethiopia's first physical link with the modern world, and it helped to establish Addis as a permanent center of Ethiopian government, as no capital had ever been before.
Now, this order to kill Mandela, where did it come from?
There were two people that came. One was a white man, one was a black man, who brought this money also. And then they selected another person who was a friend of his, they were trained together as a commander, an Ethiopian person, and they mobilized that person, and I think that person agreed with them that he was happy to get on with strangling Madiba. They wanted to strangle him.
That was how they wanted to kill him.
But they didn't want to do it. They wanted him to do it.
Yeah, because he had such close access to him.
And he was a regular person, and they knew the sequence, the time when people would be away in the evening, the shift. They knew all the pattern, so they assigned him to do it. He didn't want to do it. He wanted him to do it.
He wanted him to do it. And was this gentleman from the apartheid government? Was he? Was it an order from South Africa? Where did the order come from?
I think it's it's security services. I mean, I mean, it's very difficult to say, but it's intelligence services. But it's high intelligence. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But of course, the apartheid government must be involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the great emperor Haile Selassie was the leader at the time.
No, it's not that.
He knew all about this.
Yeah, precisely how the emperor, how much they informed him about this incident, I don't know. What he knows is that he made sure he had a great relationship with Madiba. They liked each other very much.
Yes.
That I know, but I'm not sure they informed him about this. I'm not sure.
I'm not too sure if he
But
knew
I think
about
the general knew.
Yeah.
And then also the colonel who was training Madiba, who was interpreting for him. He knows also English. Who is the picture there? He knows. He was involved.
Now I know that there's.
And the letter was I don't know who took it.
Oh, don't worry about the letter. We'll find that and read it to our
But
viewers.
Madiba acknowledged that he thank God he knew that they were going to kill him. Before he died. I think that was good that he knew about it. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the gun, because this is actually there's a movie being made all about this now. This man actually trained Madiba at the time while he was in Ethiopia.
When the 1950s opened, Ethiopian Airlines were in business. It was Haile Selassie's first major accomplishment in modernizing his country. There was everything else still to be achieved. Yet at this moment, by a stroke of luck, Ethiopia's past for the first time came to the aid of the present and made Haile Selassie and his capital the focus of Africa's new hopes. As almost the only independent African ruler after the war, Haile Selassie provided a symbol of self-respect for black men just emerging from white rule. The wind of change had come to Africa. Recognizing the emperor's unique position, the United Nations chose Addis Ababa as its African headquarters, and he embarked on a new political career.
The age in which we live, Your Imperial Majesty, is an age of paradox.
In his brand new Africa Hall, Haile Selassie presided at innumerable meetings of his new revolutionary colleagues. He became the great African father figure, the great African peacemaker, in the Congo, in Biafra, in Morocco and Algeria. It was a strange apotheosis for the King of Kings. He didn't always succeed, but his voice commanded respect, because he alone in Africa had been both victim and victor in the struggle against colonial rule. He alone had been the first martyr of the old League of Nations and was now a founder and guide of the new United Nations. Seeing his influence in the new Africa, the world beat a path to his door. The Organization of African Unity followed the United Nations and set up shop in Addis Ababa. Diplomats and businessmen flocked in. Within a decade, the face of Addis Ababa was transformed. The signs of international affluence towered over the old open drains. With the bankers and diplomats came foreign money and foreign aid. There were new ports, new roads, new dams to be opened. America trained the emperor's army. Russia built his schools. Israel provided technicians, India supplied teachers, Britain brought doctors, France offered culture, Germany sent trade missions. Haile Selassie's old empire had become the new African showcase, and everyone wanted an exhibit there. Today, Haile Selassie is besieged by foreign delegations hoping to catch his ear. He balances these contemporary forces to strengthen his own independence as shrewdly as he juggled half a century ago with the rival tribes and princes in his old fight for power. One day it may be a Japanese delegation, the next day a mission from Maoist China. It doesn't matter what political persuasion they are, they all see Haile Selassie as an essential link to the rest of Africa. At home or abroad, half his life seems consumed with ceremonial state visits, some of them purely political, some of them simply a tribute to his personal stature. Even with Italy, he's made friends again. On a state visit to Rome, 30 years after Mussolini's troops had been driven from his country. At home, he seems all-powerful, adding to the natural mystery of a divine monarchy the artificial cult of personality. His name is everywhere. His presence seems all-pervading. His word seems law. His ministers are overshadowed by him, and his government is run by him. His palace is surrounded by all the machinery of a modern administration, but even his prime minister brings the important decisions back to him. In his old age, it looks as if Haile Selassie has routed all his enemies at last, to emerge supreme, as if the all-wise and benevolent Lion of Judah has prevailed.